What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? My name is Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and I'm here to talk with you today about something. Let's find out. So I'm on the Gatherer. Let's go ahead and click everybody's favorite button, the random card button, and today we are looking at Keldon Warlord, or Keldon Warlord. I guess I don't know exactly how that's pronounced. This thing is old school. Let me just say that. So, Keldon Warlord is two generic red for a creature, human barbarian, and this is the Oracle text that I'm reading right now. So this is the modern day how this card is going to play. And then we'll get into what's printed on the actual card. Oh yeah, and we'll go there. So here's how it would play today. Here's if they were to print this card right now, this is the text they would put on it. Keldon Warlord's power and toughness are each equal to the number of non-wall creatures you control. Now that I find really fascinating, and the detail about this that I find fascinating is not exactly the card and what it does. I just love the fact that even in the Oracle text, it references walls. And the reason that that is significant is because in the olden days, they actually had there were creature types that had their own rules. And that's why a lot of the cards that allow you to modify creature types specifically say, target creature becomes the type of your choice except legend or wall. And the reason for that was legend was its own creature type, and it was later changed to the legendary super type. But before, creatures were the only things that could be legend. Well, I think creatures were the only things that were legendary at this point. I could be mistaken, but I'm fairly certain that's the case. And so if a creature had a creature type legend, then the legendary rule as we know it today applied to it. It functioned differently back then. You can see yesterday's video for a brief description of that. That's irrelevant for my purposes here today. But the other creature type that had special rules was wall. And the reason that that's relevant is because walls are not allowed to attack, or at least that was the case back in the day. So walls could not attack. And for a long time, there were just walls. The creatures were just called walls. And if a creature was a wall, it couldn't attack. And sometimes there'd be reminder text on the card saying, yeah, guys, because this is a wall, it can't attack. And it was really fun too, because there were walls that had like really strong power. Like there was I think Wall of Blades was the one that comes to mind. It was like a 3/5 that with flying for 4, I think, maybe 3. I remember thinking it was actually really solid, but it couldn't attack. But the thing was, if something attacked into it, it could kill it. So that was the cool thing. So they were pretty great. And so there were, I don't know, like walls were just a thing for a really, really long time. Somewhere along the way, they decided to change that. And so the rule switched so that it no longer was the creature type wall relevant for the sake of dictating whether or not something could attack. I don't know that there are any walls in the game that can, on their face, attack just despite having the type wall. I don't think that exists because flavorfully it makes sense. Walls are stuck in the ground generally. I know we're dealing with some magical ones here in a lot of cases, but walls are a structure. They can block somebody from advancing, but generally speaking, they will not move and advance themselves. So that's the idea, that's the flavor. Okay, cool. Well, they changed it, and now what would have been printed as a wall previously is now printed as a creature with defender. Defender now means that it cannot attack. And so we see a lot of cards that have defender that are like clearly, humans, but they're guarding something. And so it's like, okay, then flavorfully they will always stay back and defend. And in a lot of cases, those cards will have some kind of activated ability or some kind of nuance where if a certain condition is met, they will be able to attack as though they didn't have defender. So okay, fine, but it's clearly human and they have defender. Also, there are like animated trees and those kinds of things. Whereas like okay, they're rooted in place, so they can't attack. But if somebody gets near them, they can whack them. Like okay, that again flavorfully that all makes sense. So I say all that to say that what a wall was in the bygone days. So what Keldon Warlord would consider a wall is actually what we today would think of a creature with defender. So I'm really intrigued by the fact that when they were updating the Oracle text here at some point, at no point did they review this and go, wait a minute, that should be equal to the number of creatures you control that do not have defender. Like that's how I would have imagined that to read, if I were rewriting the Oracle text. But no, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of non-wall creatures you control. So you could have an entire army of defenders for whatever reason, but as long as their creature type isn't wall, Keldon Warlord counts them. That's fascinating. I also find it interesting that its type is human barbarian, but if you look at the card, and we're specifically looking at the fourth edition printing of this, the type is Lord. It says summon lord just because of the time. There was a time when creatures, as we know them today, were used to be called summons. So okay, but its creature type is clearly lord, and that was changed to human barbarian. Now, human being added later, I understand because there were a lot of cards that were clearly humans in their artwork that were clearly humans when they were printed, but the human type didn't get added and didn't become significant until later. So them going back to the archives and just calling it out and like acknowledging, yes, these are humans. So if somebody wanted to make like a legacy humans deck, if Keldon Warlord fit, sorry, it's over here. If Keldon Warlord fit in that deck, cool, you could run it and it would count as a human. So it would count in, it would get any of those synergies. And if you had a bunch of walls, it wouldn't count them. But if you had a bunch of creatures with defender that didn't happen to be walls, then it would count them just fine. Crazy to me. Also, this does not count changelings because changelings, while they don't have defender, they have all creature types, including wall. So they are not a non-wall creature. Just a little nuance. I don't know when, in what crazy situation that's going to come up, but I'm just throwing it out there. Although, to be fair, I don't know in what crazy situation Keldon Warlord is actually going to be hitting the battlefield anytime soon. But who knows? Somebody might have like an old school janky commander deck, and Keldon Warlord might be a key piece of it. I'm not sure. Having any kind of creature with power and toughness being dependent on other factors in play has the potential to be very strong, especially one as general as this. It's interesting because its power and toughness are just each equal to the number of creatures you have. So I wouldn't consider this a particularly good card. I'd be shocked if it's going for more than, a couple of dollars just for the collector value because it's a win more card. It's the kind of card where if this is going to work for you, if it's going to be valuable, if you're going to get a large creature out of this, you already have a very large board state with a lot of creatures on it. And so what's one more fatty? Especially because he doesn't have any kind of evasion. Now, if he had this ability where his power and toughness were each equal to the number of creatures you controlled, and he couldn't be blocked by creatures with, power less than his, or he had menace or something like that. Then all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, now we're talking. So, that now we're in a situation where you could have a big ol' army of goblins, but your opponent might have adequate defenses for that. But then, okay, well, plan B, let me get this big fatty down, and this thing is now gigantic and he's really difficult to block or impossible to block. Deal with that, you know. So that kind of thing, or his ability to like tap and deal damage equal to his power to a creature or something like some kind of upside to take advantage of him being a big beefy guy. Because the truth is, right now, kind of best case scenario, you're going to be curving out and you're going to be putting creatures down on turns like 1, 2, and 3. And you may have, let's say you hit kind of a perfect situation and you've got like 5 creatures down when turn 4 rolls around, assuming that you don't have some kind of way of generating like an obscene number of tokens or something, then you're going to be looking at like, a 5/5 or a 6/6, for 5 with no kind of upside, you know, there's just not much value. There's not much meat there. There's nothing really to it. And the fact that it costs 4. just means that it's just way too expensive for what it does, at least by today's standards. This also seems like the kind of thing that I don't doubt for a second that in fourth edition when this came out, that it was like the finisher for a couple of, like white red weenie decks or a couple of goblin decks. I'd be shocked if it wasn't, a staple in those kind of settings, because if somebody had, well, like let's say you have a bunch of little goblins and your opponent has a bunch of big walls. Well, this guy, he could break those down because he's going to be as big as the army around him. So that's kind of cool. I don't know, like flavorfully, it's interesting. So he's the warlord. If he has a large group behind him, he is stronger. Okay, I'm not mad at that. It kind of makes sense. Also, he does count himself, so he will always be at least a 1/1. So he's never going to die because you don't have anything else on the field, which is good. That's one of those that's the kind of situation that you do see from time to time. Yeah, so I don't know. He's fine. He's fine. There's a place for him. If I had a commander deck that was designed more to be like silly old school, I'd absolutely throw this guy in there. But not in a situation where I'm trying to actually be competitive. Like if I actually want to win the game, nah, I'm not putting this guy in my deck. At least again by today's standards. So I realize I've done all this and I haven't actually read even the text as it's printed on the card. So let's go ahead and do that for a second here, guys. Let's check this out and see how Magic text has improved over time. Well, or changed over time. I guess whether or not it's improved, we'll see. So Keldon Warlord, two generic, red, red. Um, a, a picture that is just, it looks like a it looks like a Lisa Frank scribbling of Conan the Barbarian. You know what? I'm gonna leave it at that. For folks, yeah, yeah. Let's just go with that. It's not quite as sparkly, maybe as you're envisioning, but generally speaking, the form not too far off. Anyway, so he's a star summon lord with converted mana cost 4. Keldon Warlord has power and toughness, each equal to the number of non-wall creatures you control, including Warlord. For example, if you control two other non-wall creatures, Warlord is 3/3. If one of those creatures leaves play, Warlord immediately becomes 2/2. So, man, if nothing else, reminder text has come a long way. I don't think they're printing examples on cards anymore, but that's something that we would find on the ruling on the website. But I don't believe that was around when this was first printed, so okay, that makes sense. And then actually, there is actually a ruling for Keldon Warlord that was from 2008, which I find absolutely fascinating. I love these rulings. They're just so incredibly interesting. Like, where was this being played in 2008? It's also printed at uncommon. Like that's the rarity of this particular guy. So it's not like there was like some weird fringe pauper instance, because that's limited to just commons. So yeah, I'm really curious as to what situation Keldon Warlord actually showed up in 2008 for. So anyway, this is a characteristic defined ability, which is capitalized. That's interesting. I didn't realize that was a name within the rule book. Of course, that was from 12 years ago, so who knows? Maybe it's not anymore. It checks the number of non-wall creatures you control continuously and applies in all zones. It is never locked in quotes. That's pretty cool, actually. I'm glad that they specified that. So yeah, so it's just pointing out that that number is dynamic and it will change from time to time, which is exactly the point that they're trying to get to when they're printed on the card. So they had to reiterate that, it would seem. Yeah, interesting stuff. I gotta say, yeah, it's an interesting one. There are some layers to this guy. So that was a fun little ride, guys. Thanks so much. Also, I'm noticing that the sword that he's holding there, and I'll go ahead and zoom in for those of you watching on YouTube. It looks very similar to the sword that the Kurgan carried in the original Highlander. So I know that that is for references, or that is a reference for folks my age or older on the stream. But yeah, that's just what I see these spikes coming out of the hilt, and that's just what it reminded me of. Anyway, super cool. That sword was badass, by the way, and the fact that he can carry it in a briefcase, that was just super cool. I want that. Anyway, thanks for hanging out, guys. That was a weird tangent to end this on, but hey, you know what? It's late here. I've been talking about magic cards for the last 15 minutes. Um, well, talking about this particular Lord, illustrated by Kev Brockschmidt. Um, Good on him, man. He's a very threatening looking dude. All right. Well, this has been fun, guys. As always, thank you for hanging out, and I will catch you tomorrow. You guys have a great night. Have a good day, whatever time of the day it is for you. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. Oh, I almost forgot. I also stream live on Twitch every weekday morning from 5:30 to 6:30 Eastern Time. Twitch.tv/hamhocks42. Check it out. I will see you there. Later.